Hello and welcome to the Genuine Learning Blog. My name is Melissa Galasso and I am super excited to have you here to talk about a really important proposal for private companies as well as not-for-profit entities. This was a project that FASB took on because of the voice of individuals. At a September liaison meeting between the Technical Issues Committee, the TIC, of the AICPA and FASB, they meet once a year together. The Technical Issues Committee, or TIC member, brought up a very interesting issue related to COVID and private companies. And as a result of that issue being brought up at that meeting, it was a public meeting, so you could watch it on Zoom, the FASB has proposed a change to Goodwill Impairment for private companies. Now, they didn't get this timely. Right after I went on vacation, they issued this, which I knew was going to happen. So the proposal was issued on December 21st, but due to the holidays, they did give it a 30-day comment period so that when we got back, we would be able to provide feedback to the FASB. And really, this is looking at some of the impact of COVID-19 on private companies, in particular, goodwill impairment. We know that this year we're going to have to address risk and uncertainty disclosures. We know we're going to have to look at asset impairment. We know we're going to have to look at potential going concern issues. But one of the things that was brought up was something that really is very industry driven and also shows some of the just uncertainty that relates to COVID. So the Technical Issues Committee member is Michael Chang. He is one of the smartest people I've ever met and one of the nicest as well. And he works as a partner in an Atlanta firm. And he brought up an example of Del Taco, which is a restaurant chain, and obviously restaurants majorly impacted by COVID-19. And so the Del Taco is a public company. So in March, when they were forced to close all of their locations due to stay-at-home orders and not being able to eat in restaurants, they issue quarterly financial statements. In their next quarter, they took a major hit to their goodwill. But what was interesting is by September, when they TIC met with FASB, the restaurant chain, Del Taco, had actually recovered a lot of its losses, right? Restaurants started to become more creative. They started to instead really think about delivery or takeout or eating outside in some states is permitted, or being able to operate at maybe half capacity and finding new ways of providing their yummy food. And that's exactly what Del Taco did. And they were able to see their sales recover. They were able to see some recovery. Unfortunately, once you impair your goodwill, it's kind of done. And so the problem with triggering events is that they happen throughout the year. For private companies, we don't prepare interim financials. So they may have had a triggering event happen in March, but by the time they get to their December year ends, they have either recovered from that project or there's some improvement. And so obviously every quarter feels like a new thing happening in the country. And so as a result, having a triggering event back in March and then having to reflect it in December after you recovered seemed to be slightly misleading. And so as a result of the cost and complexity of having to evaluate these triggering events and measuring them in an interim period when we only report on an annual basis seemed to create a lot of cost, right? Having to do a goodwill impairment in an interim period when I'm not going to actually report it until the end of the year. And if they're doing it at the end of the year, even knowing when you would have had that triggering event, what was the date, can be very difficult because, again, they're not looking at it throughout the year. They're only doing this on an annual basis. In addition, there was questions as to whether this would even be useful information to the user if you're preparing otherwise annual information and you're including interim impairment. And so as a result, there was questions about cost, complexity, and even user relevance. And so the FASB is proposing that for, again, this would be private companies as well as nonprofits that only report goodwill on an annual basis. They would get this exception. You do not have to be using ASU 2014-02 that allows you to amortize goodwill. Private companies that are not amortizing their goodwill, as well as nonprofits that are not amortizing their goodwill, will also be eligible for this. And basically, it would provide an option to, again, you can continue to do it at the triggering event if you want. It would be an option to perform the identification and evaluation of a triggering event only as of their annual reporting year end. So you wouldn't have to do it during an interim period, and you would not be required to monitor for goodwill impairment triggering events in interim periods. Instead, you would look at facts and circumstances as of year end to determine whether or not it is more likely than not goodwill is impaired. So really taking away that interim element. If you are not electing the amortization alternative and you are doing an annual impairment test, so as opposed to doing the amortization and only doing it at a triggering event, then you would perform a triggering event evaluation only between the annual goodwill impairment test and the annual reporting date. So they're trying to even limit it for those entities. Again, it's not limited to those who are amortizing their goodwill. And so you'll notice the effective date, again, is for those annual reporting periods beginning after December 15th of 19. So that would be our, calendar 20 year ends, the ones that they really are trying to help out here. Early adoption would be permitted for financial statements that have not yet been issued or made available. So we don't expect this to come out till pretty late in Q3. Pretty late in March of Q1, right? So month 3 of the year. So for those who are going to issue their financial statements in January or February, this might not issue in time. So that's just important to know. It might be worth, if you can, holding out to see if this issues, if this is going to be helpful to your clients or to you as a private entity. In addition, if you don't elect it this year, it gives you a one-time opt-in anytime in the future to adopt this without having to do a preferability analysis. Similar to the other PCC alternatives that are out there for private entities, they're going to give you a one-time opt-in. They're not going to require that you, if you don't elect it now, that you couldn't elect it in the future. You can continue to elect it one-time preferability analysis free. All right, so there's lots of discussions about this. I know Technical Issues Committee is going to be submitting a comment letter addressing, well, what about entities who do quarterly? What are some options for them? And so I think this is going to be an interesting one. So definitely be on the lookout for that. If this is of interest to you, I know the FASB would love to hear from you. Again, later this month, that comment letter due date is out there. So let's get them some feedback about some private company alternatives. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you on a future blog. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.